We're beginning Chapter 1 of Emerging Viruses, AIDS, and Ebola, Nature, Accident, or Intentional. The World Health Organization Theory of AIDS. The World Health Organization WHO theory festered in my mind like a disease. That the AIDS virus was cultured as a biological weapon and then deliberately deployed was unfathomable. How could World Health Organization scientists and others in the United States Public Health Services, USPHS, consciously, even unwittingly create such a hideous germ? More inconceivable was the alleged targeting of American homosexuals and black Africans for genocide. The entire subject was beyond my wildest nightmares, frightening by the ramifications of such alleged atrocities. I spent months living in denial. As a behavioral scientist, I was no stranger to the subject of man's inhumanity toward man. I just feared what further research might reveal. Eventually, curiosity wore down my defenses, and I attempted on several occasions to contact Dr. Robert Strecker for an explanation. For months, then, the telephone number I had for him rang continuously unanswered. Secretly, I was thankful. The secondary sources of information I had about the Strecker memorandum were adequate for my needs. I rationalized. The few documents I had on the WHO theory of AIDS came from a holistic physician I met at a National Wellness Association conference. For years, the doctor documented the word on the street in the gay community and among the black intelligentsia was that HIV was created as a bioweapon, a man-made virus bearing stark similarities to the bovine lymphotropic virus, BLV, cultured in cows. Although American authorities quickly moved to dispel the assertion, claiming African monkeys were the source of the scourge, Dr. Strecker insisted the germ came from cow and sheep sources. Research showed a similarity between HIV and BLV. One report appeared in Nature in 1987. Strecker heralded and argued it was virologically absurd to believe HIV came from the monkey, especially since there are no genetic markers in the AIDS virus typical of the primate, and the AIDS virus cannot thrive in monkeys. The majority subscribed to the African green monkey theory. According to Strecker, whose work was reviewed by medical physician Jonathan Cullen in a 1988 issue of Townsend Letter for Doctors, the AIDS virus can and apparently does thrive in the cow, having essentially identical characteristics with the bovine virus, and this, further, gives a hint of the role vaccinations have played in either accidentally or purposefully inducing the AIDS epidemic. Collins reported that Strecker's research made sense, particularly concerning the virology and evolution of the AIDS epidemic. Strecker's first point was that AIDS was non-existent in Africa prior to 1975, and had it been the result of monkey bites occurring in the 1940s, as some allege, the epidemic should have occurred in the 1960s and not the late 1970s, owing to the 20-year timetable for case incident doubling. More telling, Strecker obtained documents through the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, that showed that the United States Department of Defense, DoD, secured funding from Congress in 1969 to perform studies on immune system destroying agents for germ warfare. Strecker alleged that soon thereafter, the WHO, funded by the DoD, began experimenting with a lymphotropic virus that was produced in cows, but could also infect humans. The WHO, Strecker noted, also launched a major African campaign against smallpox in 1977, which involved the urban population, not the rural pygmies. Had the green monkey been responsible for AIDS, Strecker professed, the pygmies of rural Africa would have had a higher incidence of AIDS than the country's urban populations. The opposite is true. Strecker reportedly examined WHO research that revealed their scientists in the early 1970s had studied viruses that were capable of altering the immunologic response capacity of T lymphocytes. He noted that such viruses were found in 1970, but only in some animals, including sheep and cows, and that the latter species is used to produce the smallpox vaccine. Literature provided by the Strecker Group urges readers to please wake up. In 1969, the United States Defense Department requested and got $10 million to make the AIDS virus in labs as a political ethic weapon to be used mainly against blacks. The feasibility program and labs were to have been completed by 1974 and 1975. The virus between 1974 through 1979. The World Health Organization started to inject AIDS-laced smallpox vaccine into over 100 million Africans, population reduced in 1977, and over 2,000 young white male homosexuals, Trojan horse, in 1978, with the hepatitis B vaccine through the Centers for Disease Control and the New York Blood Center. Collins, in his review, added, Strecker remarks that it would be relatively easy to implant such viruses in the cow carcasses used to produce the smallpox vaccine. When the smallpox vaccine sera was recovered from the animal carcasses, animal lymphotrophic viruses could be carried or mutated or incorporated in the vaccine. The epidemiology of multiple contaminated smallpox vaccines gives in the The epidemiology of multiple contaminated smallpox vaccines given in the early 1970s would provide exactly the right timetable for such a widespread AIDS epidemic in Africa today. Strecker vigorously promoted his theory that the AIDS virus was transmitted to the American homosexual community during the course of the experimental hepatitis B vaccination program sponsored by the USPHS. Between 1978 and 1979, in United States Public Health Service. I should have just said that to begin with. I recalled reviewing this research as a postdoctoral student at Harvard. At this time, Collin wrote, the United States Public Health Services notes the recipients were sexually active, having more than one sexual partner, and at particular risk for developing hepatitis. The homosexual populations given the vaccination were in 6 major cities, including New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, St. Louis, Houston, and Chicago. Epidemiologically, these cities now have the highest incidence of AIDS and ARC, as well as the highest death from AIDS. After reading this, I began to question more of what I learned about the origin of AIDS. My curiosity piqued by the D.O.D. appropriations request for 1970 beckoned me to investigate further. What does ARC mean? Excuse me. ARC, AIDS-related complex. Bit of a short chapter. I'll begin chapter 2 in the next video. Join me there.